Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Wellness Podcast, transforming lives one conversation at a time, where health meets holistic harmony. As they say, health is wealth. And on this show, we will be diving into various aspects of human health, from physical fitness to mental well being. And also, we will be having on this show tons of professionals who would come on and inform us, giving us insightful advice and professional insights that would help us to live a healthy and fulfilling life. And with me on this show is Dr. Casey Mumba.
Hi,
You're welcome, sir.
thank you very much.
And as your host, I'm Tifayo. And once again, welcome to the Wellness Podcast. So, sir, can you please give us a little introduction about yourself?
Okay, so I am Dr. Casey. Casey is short for Kinetical Momba, and I currently work in Ibadan. I've been in practice for about 5 years now. I work as a medical officer, almost equivalent to general practice in Nigeria, in the Nigerian setting. And I'm very passionate about public health, bringing care to people who cannot normally access that kind of care. That's pretty much about it. In my free time, I really love to listen to music. I like to travel a lot, and I also like to just converse with people. So that's what I'm doing right now.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. So as we kick off, let's say, what has been your experience so far in the medical industry?
In Nigeria, I
Exactly.
imagine. Okay.
Yes.
Because I didn't school in Nigeria, so I
Okay.
came back after schooling, and huge, there are some huge differences between the industry outside and the industry in Nigeria.
Okay.
In Nigeria, there's this huge dichotomy between the care that the poor people get and the care that the rich people get. You know, two people have the same disease, have the same prognosis, but then they have, depending on how much money they have, the one may live longer than the other. And that's a real problem in Nigeria. That has been my experience, that care depends on how much money you have. The biggest crime in Nigeria is to be born poor. So that's just been my experience over time. Of course, thankfully, sometimes government hospitals try to bridge that gap, but even at some point, you realize that even in the government hospital, money is still necessary to get the kind of care that people want, that they deserve. Yeah.
That's quite saddening at some point, and also very intriguing.
Yeah.
Well, be it as it may, let's go to the main focus of today.
Yeah.
As at January 2024, there has been cases of cholera outbreak
Yeah.
all over Africa, starting with the Zimbabwe, the Zambia, DR Congo,
Yeah.
and many other countries in Africa. And at about April this year, there was a much more crazier situation of a mass outbreak in Nigeria. Although it has been before April, but it became much more renowned about April this year. And then May, and then now we're in July. We've had cases in about 33 states in Nigeria.
Yeah.
And it keeps spreading. Can you give us an insight about how this disease came to be as a whole?
So, cholera is a disease caused by bacterium called Vibrio cholera, and it thrives in places with poor sanitation. The way that it is transmitted is something called the fecal oral route, which simply means, and in fact, in this podcast, I'm going to try to avoid medical jargon as much as possible, because I believe I'm not talking to doctors, talking to people, other people. I don't want to call them laymen. So yeah, it thrives. It's transmitted through fecal oral routes, which literally means that somebody who has it poos or defecates. It goes through the feces, goes into, say, a water stream or water body or into some kind of food, right? And then another person eats it. So that's why we say fecal oral. That's feces oral mouth. That's the synopsis of the disease. What it causes is diarrhea. So it's called an acute diarrheal disease. Acute meaning sudden onset and severe. Diarrheal, obviously, diarrhea. And I don't need to explain disease. Right. So it causes an acute diarrheal disease, which is characterized by passage of watery stool. In fact, just call it passage of water, through the anus. It would almost be like the person was peeing from the other side.
Wow.
And the water that's excreted can be so large in quantity. I'm talking about like 1 liter per hour.
Wow.
It can get up to 1 liter per hour in very severe cases. So imagine losing. You don't drink 1 liter per hour.
No way.
so
That's not happening.
That's not happening. So imagine losing 1 liter per hour. So part of what kills people is the dehydration that comes from it, the loss of the electrolytes, and the effects, the consequence of that loss of electrolytes and dehydration. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. That's serious. All right. As of today, NSCDC has recorded over 2,000 cases in over 33 states. Now, from your experience and perspective, what would you attribute to the cause of that quick spread within just a few months?
There's two things. Number one is our poor sanitation system.
Okay.
Number two is how we live in clusters. We live in clusters. Nigeria is a very dense country, especially in the south. Less so in the north, but in the south, we live in clusters. So any disease that comes in has greater chances of spreading from person to person because of the way we live. I said there are two things, but then at the background of all of this is poverty. Poverty influences everything. So I'll take the first one, which let's start with the cluster one. Like I explained earlier, if you have people, like if you have in this room 2 people, if one person had a cold, the chances of spreading to the other person may not be so high. But then if you took that number from 2 to 10, then the chances suddenly multiply.
Yeah,
right. The odds of that happening. Right. And so then the second one is the sewage system, how we dispose of our sewage. We do a terrible job at it. I think for the longest period of our growth in the country, the government has somehow gotten away with not planning sewage systems. So people just build indiscriminately, and then they sometimes, if they have a conscience, they sink a soak away.
Suck away.
If they don't have a conscience, or if the funds don't allow, they just discharge it into the gutters. So we don't have a sewage system that's run by the government that purifies whatever effluent is coming out, and compared to, for example, when I lived outside the country, I never saw a suck away. I never saw a tanker come and suck anything. I never, those tankers that come and I never saw any of that. I always wondered where does their poo go? Really, I actually had to read up on it. Where does their poo go? And I saw that they have a whole system for it. So we don't have that, and that means that if a person with cholera poos and then discharges that thing into the gutters, and then the gutter leads into a stream. Now, the woman who fries akara, makes other things, goes to the stream to fetch water to cook with that water. She comes, she washes some vegetables with that water, doesn't wash it properly, someone else comes and buys those vegetables, takes it home. Do you understand the link?
The chain reaction.
The chain reaction. So at the end of the day, that ensures spread, and fast spread for that matter, as opposed to if we were treating our sewage, if we're treating it and then disposing it properly, not into the lagoon, but disposing it properly, you would be able to isolate the few cases that would come up, and then it would just stop. It would just disappear by itself. So that's for me. That's really why we're battling it today.
To buttress more, I can say that, okay, so here's the thing. When I was still in Lagos, I lived in an area where everyone just packs their stuff and waits for a bookie to come on, maybe on a Saturday morning, and pack everything for them. And only God knows where they want to drop it. So,
sorry, what stuff are we talking about?
The sanitation.
Okay,
thing.
all right.
Yeah. And
I thought it was their food that they were giving
the disposal of
Right,
waste and everything.
yeah.
So they will come on Saturday morning and then pack it. Only God knows where they will drop it.
Yeah.
Now, where I got more intrigued with the poor disposal was at a point when I used to, move along that Ibafo Beggar Road.
Right.
Oh, there is this stench.
Smell,
I won't even call it this stench.
Yeah.
That invades my nose.
Yeah.
Whenever I go, I have to just, in fact, going there, passing by, I already have this mechanism of just hold my breath,
Right.
and get a tissue, or tissue or towel,
Right.
to make it much more effective. Because I feel like I want to puke.
Yeah.
So imagine someone going there, having contact with all those things,
Yeah.
and there are people who are selling food
Close to it.
close to that
Right.
place, and I feel like, God, where are we going as a country?
Yeah.
And
There's
it shouldn't be.
yeah.
It shouldn't be. Well, moving on. The nature at which this whole thing is spreading right now, I wonder which age group is likely to be most affected by this.
Right. So, when you're talking about age groups, I'd say that all age groups are affected. Anybody who is susceptible to the disease will get it. However, when they've gotten it, which age group is likely to suffer more?
Mortality.
Yeah, in terms of mortality, the children will, and the reason is very simple, that they have less reserve or fewer reserves in terms of fluid in the body. So for example, if a grown adult has watery diarrhea for 2 days, he might be okay. He might not look so sickly. He might just be a bit tired. But if a child has watery diarrhea for 2 days, they may be close to heaven's gates, if you understand what I mean. Yeah. So it's because they have fewer reserves, So it affects everybody. Like, just that when anyone has it, if children have it, they tend to have greater mortality. And by the way, I don't know if you're aware, the mortality of this cholera untreated, when it's not treated, it's about 50 to 70%.
Yes, true.
And that's very high.
Very
However,
high.
when treated, then the mortality falls significantly to single digits. So, yeah.
Wow. I mean, so what I read on the news that the government has declared a national emergency due to the current crisis, and it has been recorded that 50 people have been already recorded dead, and that alone is already feeling scary to me. So now, with the measures the government have put in place, I even heard of the vaccine and the test kits. And I heard that almost all the states have been equipped with test kits, and vaccine is already in place to, help curb the spread. Now, looking at these measures, how quickly do you think this disease can be curbed and contained?
I don't want to be a bearer of bad news, but in my small experience and in my thinking, you could do the vaccination as much as you want. You could, say we declare state of emergency. And Nigeria loves to declare states of emergencies. We have declared state of emergency in everything imaginable, and we still have those problems today. I think there was a time growing up they declared state of emergency in electricity.
Yes.
Yes, we might be running on gen right now. if I'm not mistaken.
Should we
So
say it?
we should not say it. So, do you get the point
I
that,
get the point.
declaring a state of emergency, in my opinion, doesn't mean anything. However, or should I say that? Let me say, having said that, we, until the government is serious or gets serious about fixing the sewage system, until they get serious about putting in building codes. Okay, you can't build like this. You can, and then enforcing them, not just putting them in, enforcing them. Okay, if you build here, you have to create a connection to the sewage system that we've created. Until they get serious about that, we will just be putting band-aid on a leaking pipe. Right, you may, if you put enough band-aid, you may be able to stop the leak temporarily, but then after some time, when the pressure builds up, it'll sprout a leak. So, that is just what I think. You might give test kits, that's amazing. You might give people vaccines, that's amazing. But then, how many people are you going to vaccinate, really? Number one. Number two, why not just start to deal with the real problem? So I have realized that in this country, we are not keen on dealing with the real problems. We just do surface stuff, and then we celebrate it.
More like we cut the stem and leave the roots.
Yes, we leave the roots, and then we use prayer to cover the rest.
Interesting. I mean, like you said, cholera is an hygiene-related disease. It is caused by that poor hygiene and the environmental factors that also add to it. And I would say that for some reason I feel like cholera is a man-made disease. Like it's caused by man himself. It's not like it came from a wind through the east or a wind through the west. It is all done by men's carelessness. We are the ones causing this thing. We are the ones making it to spread them up.
Right.
But then I wonder, looking at the balance of the society, I feel like cholera is more like. Am I wrong?
You're not wrong. People may not want to agree because they will say, "Oh, it's not just Nigeria, Southeast Asia. They're still dealing with cholera. Are they poor? Would you say India is poor?" Well, it's not just poor in terms of money. It's poor in infrastructure. It's poor in infrastructure. So, for instance, you might be wealthy. We have wealthy Nigerians that drive on bad roads.
Yes, true.
Right.
True.
Yes, we have wealthy Nigerians that don't have electricity in their houses. Right. So, I mean, you might be personally rich, but you live in a poor country with poor infrastructure. So, it is. Yeah, it's a disease of poverty. It's a disease of poor sanitation. And unfortunately, when it happens like that, it overwhelms the already fragile health system that we have in such countries. Compared to richer, more industrialized countries like the US, you may not find cholera in those countries. You will not find in those countries because they have infrastructure that ensures that waste is disposed properly, sewage is disposed properly and treated. And so there's no way for you to even come in contact with what's it called, the sewage. They were not always like that, by the way. Many years ago, countries like the US, for instance, they battled typhoid epidemics. That this typhoid that we talk about.
Yes.
They battled. In fact, there's this funny, well, not so funny story, but there's a story about some Mary lady, typhoid Mary. And she kept infecting. She was a chronic carrier. She wasn't sick, but she had it in her, and so she was a cook, so she kept cooking for big people, and every house she went to, she infected them. And then once they started coming down with typhoid, she would leave and go to another place. I mean, that happened maybe like 100 years ago or so. But they've grown past that. They've gone past that. They've built infrastructure, and so that's why I'm repeating again and again, almost like a broken record. The solution to these problems is adequate infrastructure. ensure that cities like Lagos, big cities, Port Harcourt, Abuja, have proper waste disposal and disposal of sewage, proper disposal of sewage, and then ensure that our waterways are not contaminated. And that's it. It will take a lot of billions of naira or dollars to do, but it's worth it at the end of the day.
And to make it even much more interesting, I realized one thing I was going through, and I discovered that all the countries who are affected by this outbreak rather, they are all third world countries.
Yeah.
They are all from Southeast Asia to
Yeah.
Africa. They are all third world countries, and it begs the question: what are we doing?
It makes me sad that we continue in cycles. We continue in cycles. I read about countries like Singapore, for example, and they started as a third world country,
Yes,
and they
sure.
just decided that this was what they wanted to do. They started with getting the best brains to come into Singapore. Lee Kuan Yew, you might have heard of the guy, and he essentially transformed what do you call it? Singapore. I feel like the problem with third world nations sometimes is we just lack the political will to solve endemic problems. An example is this cholera, yes, it is. And then in 2024, we're still talking about a cholera outbreak in Nigeria. Another example is electricity. In 2024, we're still crying about the cost of fuel. We're crying about, okay, fuel is expensive and there's no NEPA, Then they say, oh, don't worry, there's no NEPA because you're not band A. You see, the problem really is your poverty. If you were rich, you'd be in band A and you'd have lights.
I can imagine your experience as someone who's actually lived abroad and coming back to Nigeria.
Yeah.
And the adjustments you have to go through.
Oh, I went through a period of depression. I'm not even kidding. I'm serious. I did. I went through a period of depression when I came back. I think I came back in August, September. And from September to December, I was just depressed. I just did not understand how, because I'd gone for somewhat of a long 7 years. I was outside for 7 years. And in those 7 years, I came home just once for 2 weeks, and then I left again. So I could not understand how people could live and work in a chaotic system. I later understood that Nigerians love chaos. Chaos is what gets you out of bed.
There was this meme. I said to start chaos is easy.
Yes. He on Twitter or X, you just find that people just sit down like, it's too quiet here. How can we start something? Then he just say something.
Let the world burn.
So yeah, I think that that was a big adjustment for me. I temporarily escaped from Nigeria. Went to Ghana to stay for a while.
Okay.
In Accra. It's a lot more quiet than Nigeria. Actually, Accra, I mean. People are slow. They're not panicky. They're not, So
fast paced.
Yeah, they're not so fast paced. They're slow paced. So I stayed in in Accra for a while. Then I had to eventually come back to face Nigeria. So yeah, that
it must have been a lot.
It was a lot.
Like, I'm trying to be in your shoes. Oh God, I can't even imagine it. I can't imagine, because even the little I experience in Nigeria here. Okay, for example, now where I stay, we have lights every day.
Okay.
So at some point, I'm scared of going to my local area where my family is. Because the light there is horrendous.
Yeah.
I feel like, how do you people live?
Yeah.
For a week.
Yeah.
You don't get light.
Wow.
It's like we're on Gen. Are you serious right now?
Are you sure they're citizens?
At the point they said it's better. Then he went back to the Italy school again. Like, this is just like moving in circles. How do we live like this?
And everyone's adjusted to the chaos.
That's it.
That's what it is. That's the part that surprises me.
We move on fast.
And I think that this is not a political podcast, but our politicians have realized it, they realized how lucky they are. They realized that if you push a Nigerian to the wall, he will break the wall and go past
Another way out.
it. He will not push back. So politicians are so happy. I just imagine in Abuja every night where they just hold their caucus meeting and they just like, we bless the old political god for for giving us Nigerians.
Oh my God, what have mercy.
So
Well,
yeah.
we've had a lot of discussions, and I can say that you've really shared a lot of insights. You've shed a lot of light. A few things that I didn't know about. For example, I didn't know. I used to see it in textbooks that you stew, but I didn't know how the stew always was like.
Yeah.
They would do it in a solid way, but now I'm saying that it's more like passing water.
Yeah.
I mean, that alone is already scary.
Yeah.
Imagine how much water is in my body in the
Yeah.
first place.
Yeah.
So then, as we come to the end of this whole thing, I would say that what are the final words you have?
For those who can afford to, I just say they should, treat their water, avoid eating out, or if you eat out, you should probably then, if you buy a takeaway pack, for example, you should warm the food up properly and all of that. But I think people should really avoid eating out in this period. Then, sometimes when people ask me this question, okay, what's your advice? I'm a bit careful because the people that this disease affects the most are poor people.
Yes, true.
If you say don't drink pure water, what do you want them to drink? Do you understand? The advice I give people at my practice is I just say, look, when I was growing up in Nigeria, when I was much younger, my mom, we were not rich people, back then. We're just like every other person around us. My mom we used to get borehole water from the landlord's compound. So it was one of those houses where the landlord would just build a wall to separate himself from bloody tenants. so I don't know if I'm allowed to say that word. But so the landlord had borehole and we had a well that he dug for us. So we would use the well water for everything else, but then we would go fetch in gallons borehole water, bring it to drink. But we wouldn't even drink it. We would put it in a big pot and then boil it.
Okay.
After boiling, we allow it cool, then we put it in washed bottles and then we put it in the fridge. So we didn't have money, but that was the thing my mom thought of. She being an educated woman, she just said, we should drink clean water in the house, even if we don't have the money to buy branded bottled water. So we did that, and I never had typhoid growing up. I never had, you understand? So the point I'm making is I tell people at my clinic to look for small ways that they can make healthy choices. Instead of buying that pure water, maybe fetch that borehole, boil the water and put it in a bottle and drink the water, especially if you live in an area where you've heard that a couple of people, then you should know that it's in the neighborhood.
It's around you.
Yeah. So, you know how they say that when you hear the testimony of your neighbor, then God is in the neighborhood. So when you hear your neighbor has had cholera, you know that
And cholera is in the neighborhood.
So you have to be very careful. I'm giving this advice to people because I don't know if it makes sense to give advice to government.
It does make sense because, they are there to serve the people.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if there are the things that affect us, we feel it more than they feel it.
Yeah.
So we should have a voice to say it out.
I think that, for example, one thing that they can do in cities like Lagos, Ibadan, is design and implement a sewage system. Already, these cities are built up, so I don't know how they're going to do it. It's not my job to think of how they'll do it. It's their job. But it's a good thing to do. I think if any governor successfully did that, he'll be remembered for the rest of eternity.
He'll be a national hero.
Yes. Just think of a state's sewage system and how to fix the dump. I mean, if you go to some parts of Lagos, you will see the pipes from people's toilets just
Yes.
draining into the lagoon. I don't know if you've seen that.
I've heard of it. Like, I actually had a friend who made a video. Then I was still at uni, like I was studying for my masters, and she brought to claim like, what is this? What is
Yeah,
this?
yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, they just drain it into the lagoon, and then I mean,
Just imagine.
just imagine. So I don't even want to think about it. So that I'll just advise that they take it seriously. They take it seriously. These are problems of 1850, 1860. This is
Yes.
2014.
Like big 2024.
2024 rather. I went back 10 years now. 2024. We should not be talking about these things. We should be talking about how AI is good or how it's bad or what it's doing or what it's not doing. We should not be talking about cholera and how people are dying from cholera, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Yeah.
True. True. Thank you very much, Dr.
Thank you.
Casey
Yeah.
Momba, for honoring us today.
Yeah.
We are really, really glad. And to all our viewers at home, I believe you've picked a thing or two. Don't forget, you can be careless about a few other things, but you see, this health, you cannot at any point in time take it lightly. Health is wealth, it's for a reason, no matter how rich you can be. See, when that health is lacking, you feel like a dead and poor man. So please, whatever you can do, like you said, in the most effective way, you don't have to break a bank. Take care of yourself. Try and do your best to ensure that you give yourself, your family, your children the best option for health. The water they drink, the food they eat, the things that go into their mouth, that touch their bodies, ensure that you take care of it. As parents, this is like a duty to you. And as individuals, you owe it to yourself to ensure that you take perfect care of your hygiene. Because what? At the end of the day, your health is priority. And this is the end of the Wellness Podcast for today. I look forward to seeing you again next time around. Once again, I'm your host, Tifayo. I'll see you next time.